Happy Friday
That intro
afternoon,
music.
everybody. Yeah, you like that?
That was
I
a banger.
Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another MSP Cyber Roundtable. We're excited to have David and Dean on from Helpt. We're going to go into the depths of the anatomy of a service ticket today. And I imagine we're going to talk about some efficiency things and some people communication things. But before we dive into that, how are you guys?
Doing good. I thought you were going to say we were going to dive into the depths of hell.
Oh, okay.
No, all right.
That
all
wasn't
right,
as
all right.
that wasn't as
Is that your
as
first
good as
attempt at that one?
I'm going to try that one again, but yes, that was the first one. I got to workshop it a little bit. We'll get there.
That was good. It wasn't as good as the house flipping pun you had just before, but it was pretty close, man.
Thank you. I try too hard. Sometimes it comes out and it lands, so I'll take it.
Awesome. Well, the past few weeks I've been asking people about their favorite foods, but we're switching it up, man. We're doing a big switch up, and we're asking favorite songs. Matt leaned back, worried because he didn't know there was going to be a switch up.
I don't want to recycle my favorite song from last time. I'm thinking, just do me last.
Okay. Dean, you're up first. No, David's going by alphabetical order.
So the problem I have,
he's going to say the same thing I'm going to say.
I've traditionally mostly listened to EDM for like the last 30 years. So
you don't know the names of the songs you
that
listen
aside,
like
I'm a big Madonna fan. So any like classic age Madonna,
okay,
I'm there.
So this is why Dean and I get along so well. My favorite, Like a Virgin by Madonna. One of the things that I will karaoke at any given chance. I'm all for it. So I think Dean didn't say like a virgin just so that I could. Thanks, Dean. Appreciate that.
Okay. Matt, what about you? You're a big Madonna guy also.
Not a big Madonna guy.
Are you sure? Because I swear. You could be.
So my favorite song's different any day of the week. Right now at this moment, I'm feeling Hey Pachuco from Royal Crown Review because I'm like, I want to go dancing. I want to go swing dancing. Mm-hmm. So I just can't. I like anyway. That's where I am right now.
I like that.
So where were you during the brief swing revival of the 1999 2001?
I was I was enjoying EDM at that moment. So I didn't really know what I was missing. Honestly, like EDM dancing sucks.
Wait. Say that again. EDM dancing sucks.
I've learned to appreciate ballroom styles. So
you gotta get moving. We gotta get Matt some glow sticks.
Well, once you realize the most popular EDM is either a 4/4 beat structure or is in 2-step, then like 50% of your ballroom skills do translate over just at a faster tempo.
Okay, only if everyone else in the room is on board with that.
Or at a slower tempo if you're willing to go at a slower tempo.
Saying, you could be that guy.
My favorite Madonna song is Hanky Panky.
I can't believe I don't have a favorite Madonna
song.
Okay.
What about in general though, Zach? Like, what's your if you weren't Madonna swayed, like
well, here, let's see what Spotify says is currently most listened to.
So I do this.
It's Ambitions as a Rider by Tupac. It's currently my most listened to song.
Okay. Was that on All Eyes on Me or was that a...
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
We have a question before we move, guys. Yeah, so, this isn't for us. This is an audience to an audience question. I'll forget it.
That's me. That's me talking to Matt Fox.
Oh,
well, let me do a let me do a little interview of these two guys. David, we'll have you go first with the alphabetical. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about you and your career up to this point. Tell everybody who the hell you are.
Oh, wow. All right. So,
other than a pun expert and Madonna aficionado,
I graduated from pun college. It was great. Got my diploma there. Ended up finding pontificator. I wish I had some puns right now that I could lay out. Now I feel like I'm on the spot, not gonna be able to come up with it. But from pun college, I went straight into tutoring and teaching. And so I really liked that aspect of things. From there, I went into actually recruiting, so like technical recruiting, because I was learning about the types of things that people were doing and I was finding the right candidates. And then from there, I found myself wanting to learn a lot about one thing versus a little about a lot of things. And so I started working for a company that was manufacturing transceivers. Most of the people watching, in the network space, they know, hey, these things are going into switches, routers, whatever it was.
Wait, hold on. Now we got to pause. What now is it? A transceiver?
Okay.
Did I get it?
Transceiver. Yep.
Matt,
Yep.
you got to let him be the transceiver
well, first
expert.
of all, I just have to say I love this word.
Yeah,
because
me too.
it's like it sounds like a made up word.
It sounds like it's trying to weave between 3 or 4 other real words and just
it's like a Star Trek thing.
Yeah,
like I pulled the transceiver out of my pocket.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, all right, nice try, transceiver. You got me. What's a transceiver? They're in
transceiver.
Everything, you said.
They're in everything. They transmit and receive at the same time. Transceiver.
Oh.
I know it. They end up in networking, like data centers and things like that, because
What's the protocol that they work on? Is it like CAMS or something?
It's universe.
So CMIS is like the 400 gig, different management standards and stuff like that. So it's light. It's communicating with light. So you're blinking on one side, you're receiving on the other side. The blinker on one side is just a super fast little capacitor that's just saying blink, 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 blink. On the other side, there's a diaphragm that's actually like receiving this light, and so it's capturing the blinks. It's putting it through some different processes. I don't want to get too deep into it. And then it's telling us, how many zeros and how many ones came from the other side. And, we're transferring data super fast. Yeah, I feel like we kind of went off the rails.
No, we're right on the rails here.
Perfect. So while I was there, I was overseeing the global tech support organization. And that was for big customers, because the people that would use these types of things were, transferring lots of data. So we had big carriers of cell phone companies that you probably have in your pocket. We had big data movers, things that you'll see on your computer. And those huge companies required all kinds of crazy things from us as a support team. And that's what kind of brought me into this need for a little bit of help. And when I had the opportunity to leave that organization and do my own thing, I said, you know what, huge market need for somebody to be able to be there to bolster the support teams of these companies that are providing support to these people that are requiring these insane SLAs. So here we are, a couple of years later. Helpt.
Perfect. Do you have what's your favorite thing to do in your free time?
Read, actually. I was the guy that never read in high school, and now I'm reading a lot. I'm actually going through the Silo series. So I'm on the second book. Yep. Right. The first book was good. Second book, not as good. I'm kind of nervous. We'll see what happens on the third one.
What's your favorite character in Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Oh man. So all right. So I'm not that kind of nerd. I don't know any of
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
What kind of nerd are you?
Yeah.
Transceivers, dude. What?
The transceiver nerd. I said that somebody looked like Saitama recently, and then I learned that he's from One Punch.
Oh, wrong cartoon.
Yeah. Oh,
I've heard of it. I've heard good things. I've heard amazing things. I've seen none of it.
Yep. So that's my backstory when it comes to the MSP stuff. Like, Dean's the wizard.
Okay. All right, Dean, man, you're up. Let's hear the story.
It's not that exciting. I've been tinkering with electronics computers since I was a kid. I green wire soldered my first Apple IIe kit clone in like 1989. And then somewhere along the way, I foolishly abandoned computers and insisted I had to go to school for electrical engineering, which I did not do well.
So you know a little bit about transceivers too, probably.
Yeah, it's just a DAC. It's just a fancy word for a DAC. And so while we're on the subject, so an antenna, do you know what the actual double E term for an antenna is? It's called a waveguide. So If you're ever like at a party with electrical engineers or like anybody who does like SDR, like software defined radio, and you want to like sound important, be like, "What's up, guys? How your waveguides doing?" And everyone's gonna be like, "Oh man, this guy knows antennas."
Pull your transceiver out of your pocket and take the antenna off the top. You might be thinking about like a flip phone. I'm not sure.
It all works.
And so the second time I was at college, I needed a job, and I was like, well, I've been doing computer stuff ad hoc for years. I'll go find a computer job. And so I stumbled into my first MSP job and was like, wow, this is way better. And so then became a service manager of a pretty small regional MSP. And over time, we grew that to a $53 million organization. And thing about being successful like that is operations kind of don't matter as much. They're not as much of a focus in the organization anymore. So I got bored and decided to become a vendor, and somewhere along the way convinced the Helpt people to let me wear their logo. So here we are.
Awesome. Certainly got the logo on.
I love that hoodie, man. That's a good hoodie. We need to get us some hoodies like that eventually when it gets cold again.
I hear it. Okay.
I'm gonna make a note. No, we'll just send you the Helpt. You know, like
I would rock it, man. I'd rock it, and we stamp one of these just somewhere on it, and then we get the whole Irish flag, vibe on the whole thing. Matt says it's red, and I think it's orange, but that's okay. That's an agree to disagree moment.
It depends on which
it's orange
misprinted shirt you wear.
That's fair. Dean, tell me about the triangle on what I think is a desk, or maybe something under what I'm sure is a printer.
Yeah. So this has been my thing for a long time as a service manager. This is an authority and accountability pyramid. And because the thing I find that a lot of MSPs, because they're mostly SMBs run by the original founder, that we struggle with is we end up being the bottleneck of decision making, and we don't set good accountability and authority scopes for our staff, which dovetails nicely in today's conversation. So this is my original poster I had made that I kind of leave there so people will do exactly what you did. They'll see it and ask about it. But the idea is the decisions that are only my decisions as an executive is the very smallest part at the very top of that pyramid. Everything else is stuff that should be pushed down to your team. And it's just a way of thinking that if I can hand this off to you, then that means I can build a process around it, which now means I can scale it, which now means we can deliver it and sell it and ensure client satisfaction.
I love it. What do you do in your free time when you're not building huge organizations and getting your hands muddy with operations?
I like to dabble in woodworking, and I am a crazy obsessed dog dad.
Okay. What kind of dog? Or dog?
She is an F1B Newfie Doodle. So okay. Newfoundland and a poodle.
Wow. Very cool. I'll have to do a Google search here when we wrap up.
We'll send you pictures from her birthday, right?
Okay.
Dean, you've got some that.
Yeah.
All right.
Must be a big,
it was just last week.
Dog. That is for sure.
It's a mini because her dad was a 10-pound toy poodle, and so then you start working out the mechanics of that.
Wait,
and your brain goes to a dark place.
I don't understand, but we don't need to go there.
Fair enough. Well, you can finish by telling me the goofiest show that you've ever really enjoyed watching.
The goofiest show I've ever really enjoyed watching.
You were talking about Nickelodeon. I swear everybody was going to.
I was not at the right age. So this is going to be a controversial answer. I was not at the right age when the original Pokemon cartoon came out. I was above the median age for it, but I used to still rush home from high school to put that on, even though I was not into Pokemon, because it was just, to me, so absurd.
It was my generation. Keep going. I want to hear you continue talking about how you thought it was obscure.
Well, so I keep in mind I could go for an hour on this, but so you've got a civilization that has perfected infinite mass energy storage technology, right? We've got a Pokeball where I can put a living thing, but let's pretend they're not even living. I can just put any matter in there that I can infinitely store, shrink down, completely negate all of the normal properties of that matter, and then I can transmit it instantly to Professor Oak somewhere else. So that's like the pinnacle of if you go like levels of civilization in terms of like a galactic sense,
We got
like
transportation.
that's
We got
one
support
step
things.
below the highest level that we postulated civilization could reach. Like that's one step below Dyson sphere. And the best they did was they trapped wild animals in it and made them fight each other. And I always found that premise to be the most ridiculous thing, because I was like 15 when I started watching it. So I used to love watching the show looking for stuff like that. And I'm still a big fan. Any of my former staff would say I'm still a big fan of doing that with anything I'm into. I will point out when the plot contradicts the rules of the universe the plot itself is set. So
I respect that. I respect reality buffs. That's fair to me. I respect that. All right. Well, I won't tell you my favorite Pokemon then, and I'll just let
all
Matt
right.
say.
What is your favorite Pokemon?
No, I can't tell you now. Umbreon. Go ahead, Matt.
I just can't get it out of my mind. Like Dean running around the streets with an iPad, like looking for, trying to find his Poke creatures.
I did get into Pokemon Go when that came out. Yes.
I love it. What's your favorite, Dean?
My
Snorlax, probably because he's so big.
Probably my absolute favorite is probably Pikachu, only because it goes back but TV show Pikachu, because if you go in and look at the amount of time he was on the show, the amount of times Ash basically saved the entire world or won everything, and it's still this useless low-level Pokemon that will defeat a god and then in the next episode get punched in the face by like a bee and it faints. And that's so preposterous that I always loved that element of Pikachu as a character. So I project that onto 100% of all Pikachus everywhere.
All right. I appreciate it. Matt, man, let's do a lecture.
I'm going to have trouble with this transition, but here we go into the Essential 8 cybersecurity framework.
Good segue.
I really
teed you up, huh?
I'm on the wrong slide too. All right. Essential 8. First of all, before like you've got your favorite Pokemon, and this is gonna sound ridiculous, and I don't know like where my life priorities are right now. That like the fun things in my life aren't nearly as fun as the fun things in your life, Dean. But Australia's Essential 8 cybersecurity standard is literally my favorite. I've never been to Australia. Let me first say that. But like as a security professional, I'm you know we build compliance software here at Fort Mesa. We're eating and breathing security standards all day. Essential 8's really neat. I'll get into why in a few minutes, but similar to what the UK has done, the Australian government has put together this standard that's built for small organizations, you know, everyday small businesses and medium-sized businesses that maybe aren't very concerned about cybersecurity or haven't been in the past, but they want to just protect themselves. They want to know what like the normal stuff is, right? And unlike the government here in the US, who is basically given no guidance at all for that category of hundreds of thousands of American businesses that we deserve to protect, the Australians have done it. So that's what Essential 8 is. It's a great guidebook on how to protect your everyday businesses. And so if you're an MSP in Australia, like you're really into Essential 8. Like this is going to help you get your clients safe. And you know they split it up into control categories the same way, or safeguard categories the same way other standards do. This is the 8 categories of things they think are super important for small organizations to put in place. And they've even got maturity levels. So, you know, they have this thing called maturity level 0, which isn't a real maturity level. It just means you haven't reached 1 yet. But then they say, okay, when you reach this level of security, you're at maturity level 1. If you've reached that level, you're at maturity level 2, maturity level 3. This would be super great. This is a hint to any of our bureaucrats in the American government out there. We need this here. But in any case, super, super great approach. And the part that I love, and this is what makes it my favorite security standard, is its sizes from tiny little business that only has level 1 security and using the same information security manual which is a big deal because in the rest of the world, it's like you have, the small business manual. And then when you grow to be a slightly larger business, you have to throw away all that guidance and get like a different book of guidance and dig in again. In Australia, the standard scales from tiny little maturity level 1 and goes all the way up to the top secret government baseline. And so there's, like I said, level 0, which is not a real level. And then 7 additional levels, that goes up to the most stringent security standard in the world. And so that's what's pretty special. And this sounds like something that should just be part of any cybersecurity standard, but there's not another one like it in the world. So that's pretty neat. I don't have anything else to say about this really, other than it's just been popular in Australia in the last few years. So if you do business in Australia, if you are in Australia, you've got you sell to Australia, you have business unit in Australia. This is an important standard you need to know about and be able to relate to and be able to speak to in terms of how secure your systems are. But outside Australia as well, in that economic region of the world, it's popular in New Zealand. It's popular to some extent in other neighboring territories. So in any case, that's the quick Essential 8 overview. And I think with that, unless you guys want to jump in the Essential 8 party, I'm ready to throw this away and jump into...
I'm just curious, how are they enforcing it or like incentivizing folks to actually undertake it, or is it just sort of there as a tool right now?
There's a little bit of I think the liability structure in Australia, in terms of holding people accountable, there's a little bit of government enforcement around accountability in cybersecurity generally. It's a little bit stronger here in the U.S., where it's basically impossible to pin someone to the wall unless they really screw up. But the importance of it really is that if you're trying to say we're doing the right thing, the way that conversation would normally be proven is by looking at directly these guidelines. So that's really the importance. So whether you're looking for cyber insurance, or you're trying to sell to the government, or you're just trying to prove to the person down the street that you're secure, this is the standard measure in Australia.
Can you compare it to CIS and NIST?
I think, the blue at the top is very close to what CIS has done with their implementation groups 1, 2, and 3, and it's maybe a little bit easier to obtain up at even at level 3. So it's a little bit easier to obtain than a CIS IG3. But then as you go into those government baselines, those are almost one for one similar security levels as the US's NIST 853 low, medium, and high baselines. So
let me ask you this then: if I had an MSP in the States, or if I had a business in the States, and I aligned myself with level 3 of Essential 8, and then tried to come back to somebody at cyber insurer in the States, let's say hypothetically, and said, "Well, this is what I'm rocking," how would that go for me, or what would that process look like?
Well, I don't want to answer for the insurance industry, but they're all over the place in terms of their maturity level. So I think that some of the brokerages that have a high level of maturity in understanding what are really the essential ingredients of good security, they're going to really respect this, and it's going to mean a lot to them. There's other brokerages out there that barely understand what's on the application, and really it doesn't matter what standard you're rocking because they don't understand any of them. So
that was a very fair and technically correct way to answer that, and I will allow you to move on.
All right. Well, here we go. We're in today's topic.
My gosh. So my favorite Australian story, I just have to throw this out there. Sorry for derailing again. We've got a client that's in Australia, and during onboarding with all of our clients, we ask them, how would you like us to greet the end user? And usually we get, we use the acronym, or we use the full name of our business, or whatever it is. And being that he was in Australia, he said, you should greet the caller by saying, "Oi, mate, what do you want?" And we cracked up, and we don't do that. But it was the funniest Australian thing that I could come up with right now. So that just shows my depth of Australia.
What was his level of seriousness when that?
Yeah, I would say he was probably like a 6 out of 10 on the serious.
Really?
Yeah.
That makes sense. I believe it.
You should try it out.
Matt,
time,
Australia's close to Indonesia, and I only know that because I played Risk once or twice. And Lizbeth's over in Indonesia right now, Matt. What's that part of the world like over there? How close is that?
Well, it's a shorter plane ride than from here, that's for sure. I actually am not knowledgeable, and I should be knowledgeable about this, but I am not, on what cybersecurity standards are important to Indonesia. But I would guess that they are. I would guess that they're half Australian and half everything else in the world. Probably a little bit of NIST in there. Maybe that wasn't the essence of your question, but that's where my mind went.
It's probably
you brought it right back.
Yeah, it's probably a more appropriate response than the essence of my first question. Anyway, well, guys, tell us about service tickets, man. I know almost nothing. Actually, maybe not almost nothing, but I know. I would say I've probably dealt with service tickets the least out of the four of us, and probably is almost silly because how sure I am about that. Somebody go into the nitty gritty for me.
Yeah, I think that the reason why we really wanted to get into the anatomy of a service ticket is because we're not even just talking about the ticket. When we are talking to MSP clients, they're thinking about my ticketing system, what I'm going to put the status as, what I'm going to do with this ticket. But what we wanted to talk about was the holistic view, kind of the people behind the ticket on the customer side, the people behind the ticket on the agent side, everything when it comes to the anatomy of the full ticket. Dean, I'm going to let you run with it. I mean, this is your deal.
Yeah. Well, so switch gears for a second. So in a former life, I used to sell high-end AV equipment. And one of the things you're taught in selling stuff like that is that very few customers come into the store looking to buy on features. There's a very small percentage, pretty much us, like the people who are on this call, who will go in and specifically be like, how many HDMI ports does it have at what refresh rate that are, HDCP compliant? Like, that's not, most people want to know, what does it do for me? What's the benefit? And in the same vein, most of us, when we have had to open a support ticket, it's a fairly small percentage of people who do that are opening a ticket because they're tinkering and they just want an expert tip on how to get through their tinkering. Most of the time when you open a ticket, you're in pain. And by the time you've actually opened that ticket, you are already probably upset that you're in pain. And so if we talked about nothing else, the most important thing when you have a service issue, it's not necessarily going to be the resolution. It's not going to be like my 5 ITIL steps in the life cycle of a ticket. It's about understanding that a human is in pain and they're asking for help, and they probably don't want to have to ask for help. And they're already annoyed they have to ask for help. And that's when you meet them. And they may not be angry. They might not be caustic. They might not be crying, literally in pain. They could be, but people generally aren't like, oh boy, it's ticket time. And you need to approach the entirety of it with that empathy and that understanding. Yeah, it's a person who's trying to do something and they can't, and they're already upset they can't.
Yeah.
And then you hit
them.
The
fact that they're already upset is such a great. That's such a great point. Because and you said, God, I have to ask for help. I love that. I as a person, and I think Matt can probably attest to this as a business partner of mine, I do not enjoy asking for help on things. It is not a lot of fun for me to have to do. And I know many, many people out there feel the same way. And especially when you're working on something, not only am I stopped with a problem, but I'm stopped in such a way that I now have to sit on my hands and wait for somebody to come out. It's like, oh God, please no. You're absolutely right, and that's a great framing of the
I want to
problem
counter you
space.
guys a little bit here. I disagree a little bit because that's usually the feeling. However, there's some vendors that have been in my life before, which I get excited about opening a ticket because I anticipate what the experience is going to be like, and I know it's going to be great. And in that moment, the switch from frustration to like I feel better now actually happens before I get resolution. It's at the moment that I've decided to involve this other person that I know is going to help me. And so
That's really
sometimes
interesting.
it and it's not nearly common enough. It's not
I,
nearly common enough.
I have a not related. I have a not tech. It is tech related, but it's not tech related example of this. So in my Domino's world, and this is something that's going to be a very positive statement for Domino's. They had a service. What is it called? I don't know. They had a call-in service. If you were ever having issues with any of the tech things in an operation, any of the operations, you call them. This is where you identify, and then they could support and solve and diagnose and from whatever wherever. And I would have young managers of stores call me in a in a panic, like the printer's down, and it was like a really serious situation because you have a piece of that in the middle of a dinner rush go out of whack, and you've got a lot of unhappy customers, and nobody wants to deal with that. And my response would be, well, you need to call these guys; they'll be able to solve you. The next time they would have an issue, they would not be calling me stressed. They'd be calling me to let me know, hey, this happened. I got a call, whatever the name of the thing was, which I genuinely can't remember. And that point that Matt's making about having that net there and knowing that you're going to be taken care of can alleviate the stress. Like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Oh, I'll just go call. In this situation for you guys, it's Helpt, I guess.
I have a Bernie story, and I love
Adolf
Bernie.
or Matt?
I hate Bernie. One of the guys that was on my team at the transceiver organization. He, I wish it was Bernie Mac. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, too soon. I had a cat named Poopy because of that show.
Oh my gosh. So Bernie, my Bernie, not Bernie Mac or Madoff, he was the friendliest guy ever. He was the person that you would call him up in that same panic, screaming about something. You make the commitment. You say, fine, I'm giving in. I'm going to call. I'm going to get some help. He'd pick up the phone, and by the time you're done, you're talking about when you're going to get a beer and, how great things are. And from that, I really realized that negative experience that the person's having on their own can be completely turned into this amazing experience with the right support person. And so Matt, it doesn't happen when you call any of the other vendors that you don't think are good. It only happens when you call that one particular good vendor. And the power of that is amazing. We were selling the widgets. We would have people that called up saying, hey, I've got this issue, talk to Bernie for a little while, and then they'd want to buy more. It was like buying a customer with the good graces of Bernie. So I don't think Bernie would ever be watching this, but if you're watching this, great job with that. That's what we're about.
I want to take the point to say, yeah, it's great. We need Bernies, right? But this can be cultural, right? This can be created culturally. And the specific vendor I had in mind when I was telling that story earlier, but there's other vendors that fit the bill. It's not random, right? That good feeling comes from knowing that no matter who over there picks up the phone, it's going to be awesome.
Do you guys live somewhere where there's multiple hospital options? And if I were to say to you, what's the good hospital? Do you immediately have an answer in your head? It's not because they have the best doctors, because once you're in there being treated, I don't know. No one here knows like if their doctor's the best or not. It's the way they made you feel, their operational competency, if their process efficient, did it feel like it had a point to it? Did they speak to whatever your value proposition was, make you feel heard and valued in the moment? We all know it, and we might not even agree it's the same hospital. That vendor
may not even recognize when you're valuing things.
I love this example because there's two hospitals, and in one of them, when they're done with you, they hand you the paperwork and they're like, that way, right? And you're like supposed to read this thing on your own to like figure out like, is there aftercare instructions, whatever. In the other hospital,
how do I wrap this?
In the other hospital, they they consult with you, and then they hand over the paperwork, and it's like a minute and a half difference in the encounter, and it feels totally different going out the door.
It's care. I mean, like that's what it is. Bottom line, it's that somebody cares. I know, like, shout out to Chewy. I know that everybody has a Chewy story.
Chewbacca? Man, you're shouting everybody out.
No. Chewy.
You talking about those little bars?
No. The dog food place or the pet supply company.
Here's my dog on a luggage tag, by the way.
All right.
There you go.
Not that I'm obsessed.
So the Chewy stories have always been, I do some sort of transaction with them, I get support from them, and they continue to follow up. They know when my dog's birthday is. They, make sure that I'm consoled if something, God forbid, happens to the dog. Like, you hear about that, and it boils down to caring. And I think that, Matt, if that was the culture, if we lived in a culture where everybody cared about everybody else, like, the whole world would be a better place.
We got to care, man. It's community. I'm a big believer in that, for sure. Yeah. Well, let's do the anatomy breakdown, man. Let's do the I'm imagining operation, the board game. What am I looking at? What's the funny bone? What is this ticket?
So the hospital example dovetails really well into this, because you basically start off with triage, and triage is the very first step where what is happening, who it's happening to, and sort of how it's affecting them is ingested. And if you handle triage right, you can screw almost everything else up, and the end user will be likely to forgive you, even compliment you for it, because you did such a good job up front with making them feel heard, with making them feel understood, with letting them know they could trust you, and with basically just establishing here's what's going to happen next. Because if you do that, even if what happens next isn't that, you've set expectations, so then you can work around those expectations. And most people are pretty cool with that. Yeah. So that's the very first step.
I love having that on tape, by the way, that we have that recording, because I hear super frequently from service providers that like they have people on their team that they think of as useless, and they stick them in that job.
Yes. Yep. It's the feeder position. It's I'm going to put the guy who doesn't know what they're doing. Like, this person is representing 100% of the empathy and intelligence of your brand when your client either has the most pain, fear, or gain. And I'm not saying you need like a superstar in that role that like can solve all their technical issues.
They need to understand the business enough to not be pissing people off.
And also think about the good hospitals. When you go to the front desk, that person's not going to reset your bone. Like, no one expects that, but you can tell when they're bored, checked out, and are resentful of the fact you're there, versus when they're like, oh my God, welcome, Zach. I'm so sorry that, your face has fallen off, and we're going to
a lot of blood, huh?
Don't worry.
How do I wrap this?
Yeah, and you could take it to like a more micro level. Like, if you think of the same concept at any sort of like personal care service, like doctor, dentist, we all know when there's a front desk that does the intake that really does a great job of making us feel like they give a crap that we're in the building. And we're not expecting them to,
when they do, forgive me for cutting you off, but when they do a good job, it makes it really easy for the people who are next in the chain to make you feel like they're doing a good job, because they needed information from that first person to even be able. I've been in doctors' offices before where I like tell the nurse, I'm like, here's 45 minutes worth of information. And then the doctor comes in and they're like, all right, what's going on?
What's going on?
It's like, bro.
Right. And you're like, did you even read it?
What's going on?
And how many times have MSP clients said that? I feel like every time I call in, I have to restate my problem. The person doesn't know what happened. I feel like do you guys even keep notes? A lot of that is mitigated by not just a process, but a culture of this idea that like our most high touch, no ability to drop the ball experience is going to be at triage. And we may drop balls later. We can't guarantee resolutions explicitly in this industry. We cannot guarantee resolutions. We absolutely can guarantee that when you let us know about your issue, that part's going to be handled perfectly. The MSP has full control over that. And it also, because MSP is, I mean, it's a for-profit business, it allows you to figure out something that's incredibly important to everything else that comes next in the ticket life cycle. You can figure out what their business pain is and what the impact is to the business. Because what we tend to do as technical people, if somebody calls in and they say, my printer isn't working, all right, well, like, I got 2 printers behind me, like, print to the other printer, jerk. Like, what are you bothering me about this for?
But if
we don't,
it's a Domino's, and if it doesn't print to the one
exactly
on the cut table, then the whole thing, everybody's going to burst into flames, basically.
And so having that extra level of understanding at triage, oh, your receipt printer, that probably means you can't pick any orders. That probably means you have a bunch of people standing around doing nothing. I don't have anyone available that can fix that right now. It's going to be an hour. Let's come up with a reasonable workaround right now so you understand you're in a lost wage situation and can make a business decision now before we get to fixing your printer. That's a huge difference. And like back to that hospital example, you get up to the front desk and you have a cold or a cough or I'm not feeling well or a mysterious burn. That's one thing. But like you got like, I don't know, a limb that fell off and blood spurting out. Well, yeah, they're immediately going to, wheel a gurney out at the triage process because, that's kind of a big deal.
Right.
And you can do that. Any MSP can do that right now and make that client feel immediately you understand their business pain, you get them. They will forgive nearly everything that happens next if you can do that consistently. That's that trust.
Well, well, tell me more about the anatomy, because we nailed that part. Everybody,
everything. It's magic after that, right?
Right.
So you've figured out. So you've gone through your triage process. So you know who is entered into your MSP, hospital room. You know who they are. You know where they're coming from, what they think their issue is. You have a reasonable idea of the severity, and also like medical, you also know how they're going to pay for it. Those are all things you figure out in triage. Some of it behind the scenes. So what do you do next? Well, in that hospital example, they got to figure out now, I've got a room full of people that have various problems. What order am I going to see them in and who's going to see them? If it's a really, really slow day, yeah, the orthopedic surgeon probably can like put a Band-Aid on me if they got nothing to do. But like if my foot's broken, I don't want like the intern nurse who does blood draws setting that. So you need to have a dispatch process. And that dispatch process is really that next step in that life cycle of the ticket. It's figuring out, now that we've collected that initial information, who's going to work on it, when, and in what order, and how are we going to communicate that back to the end user so they're not just sitting there panicking? Because that's happened to me. It's probably happened to you guys at a hospital where you're just sitting there and you're like, what's going on?
What's
and like,
next?
You make up a story in your head, you make up a narrative. And if you're in pain, that's not going to be a positive narrative. So dispatch is communicating that to the client. Once you
Can I cut in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
My annoying cut in thing. I was having a conversation with somebody, I think it was yesterday, but it was about efficiency of communication and follow up in the sale process. And it was, you don't have to be following up saying, hey, I've got time for you right now. I've got time right now. But following up and saying, this is what's going on. I have time over here. Allows that person to then, the thing you said about the narrative spinning of, I guess they just don't think I'm important, or, I guess, what are they, closed? Like, what's all of these like worst case scenario things that you go to when you're in an unmanaged state of fight or flight. Doing the basics of communicating, even if you don't have the ability to fully solve the problem, is so helpful. And I really enjoy another Domino's example here, and I'm sure people watching will enjoy this because everybody's ordered a pizza almost. When you're waiting on that pizza to arrive, if you're thinking it's going to be there in 25 minutes and all of a sudden 50 minutes rolls around, you're like, whoa, man, what's going on? But if you expect 25 minutes and then 10 minutes in, somebody tells you, hey, it's actually going to be an hour, and then it shows up at 50 minutes, you're freaking stoked at 50 minutes. And that piece that you're describing of like, do the communication effectively so the person can be satiated and get out of that state of panic or not go into that state of panic, so valuable. I love that.
And there's a tactical business application in MSP around what you just said. So a lot of us have SLAs or SLOs, or at least try to. And the thing is, if you don't communicate, so the Domino's pizza tracker is a great example of that. That is an SLO Domino's has set and allows me to have an idea of where I am with the pizza tracker, or like DoorDash or Uber Eats. So SLO is a service level objective, which is sort of an internal goal or metric that you're not contractually obligated to offer recompense if you fail to meet, but that you're basically saying, I'm going to do my very best to hit it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you don't tell your SLA, and an SLA is a service level agreement, so that's you're contractually obligated. But either way, if you don't set those, your clients will. And to keep that food example, how many times have you been in line at like a McDonald's where it's taken more than about 5 minutes after you handed them your credit card to get your food? McDonald's does not have an SLA. They have never in the history that I've been on Earth said food in 5 minutes or less. But like that 5 to like about 8 minute window, like I stopped caring that there's a line of cars in front of me with kids in them. I don't care if the restaurant's understaffed, because I'm just thinking, the hell, guys? Like, so if you don't set an SLA or an SLO, which you control with triage and dispatch, your client will imply their own. And where I see a lot of MSPs fall into this trap is they'll be like, oh, well, we don't have those. We always strive to deliver good service. That's great. What about when you don't? What about the day you don't? Yes. So if my last 5 interactions with you, you service me in 5 minutes or less, you've now implied that's your SLO. So the first time you don't, even though we're not contractually obligated, I'm going to be like, what the heck, guys?
That's 7 minutes. That's 7 minutes. This is garbage. These guys, because they don't have the framing of how good the 5 minutes was the first few times. They don't have the perspective.
Right. And it's why we see like you guys know like Carl Palachuk, who wrote a couple of books. He had this blog for a while where he used to talk about stop saying, if you're a service industry, stop saying you're best in class, for that reason, because you're going to be like, well, 5 out of 6 times we were less than 5 minutes to support you. But, and that one time we weren't, that we're best in class. And the client's just like, yeah, but that one time you weren't and you stink. Like, you have to kind of just be the best you can be consistently. And if you can't quantify that, then you have to dial it back to a level you can, because your clients are going to be a lot happier with, we will get to every ticket in 4 hours or less. If you hit that 95% of the time, then they will be if you're like, listen, 60% of the time we got that resolved in 15 minutes, but the other 40% of the time, they're not going to be as happy, even though that's actually best in class support. The client doesn't care. So,
well, and the client in their moment of urgency isn't measuring, well, is this measuring against best in class? They're just like pissed in that moment or not. You know what I mean?
I had a client that would have done that.
They're pissed all the time anyway.
Right? It comes down to commitment. Like, if I commit something to somebody, I'm going to do that thing. We should think that way as organizations as well. But let's make sure that we can meet those commitments. I'm not going to say to anybody, I'm going to be able to do something in 5 minutes if I know it's going to take me 10. But there's no point in that.
Other than to stress everybody out and to set up a situation where it's self-defeating.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Presuming we set a realistic expectation, right? We set ourselves up for success, internally and externally. We've triaged it, got to the right person. Then what?
What's next? So the next major step is actually working the ticket itself. Is working that issue. That could be an incident, a problem, a request. So it's not always necessarily going to be something's broken, but it's actually working it. It's that stage where your technical team is going in, they're rendering that technical value, they're hopefully documenting what they did and near to, if not real time, and they're keeping that consistent communication you already started with going with the client. And we see all the time where everything up until this point has been fantastic. One of you gave the example earlier of a doctor who then enters the room and they're like, hey, so what was wrong? Like, that's the entering time. It's still working the ticket stage. And right away, you've lost all that trust that the front of house staff had just built for you. So it's important there. And what I find a lot of technical folks do is so if you to get super in the weeds on this, if you look at the DISC profile, DISE, the average type of person we hire to work a ticket, they're going to have
DI shaded in C, which is funny because I am kind of a dick sometimes.
If you're an entrepreneur or business owner, there's a good chance you have D above the line. So the ideal profile for a help desk person is going to be somebody who has I and S or I and C above the line. And that I is really that natural desire to just be thinking about what the client's needs are first before you focus on trying to inject your solution. The challenge is it's not what most of us end up hiring, because those people are pretty rare. High I people generally are not already naturally interested in a technical field. No. So you can find high I people that you can train up, but most MSPs aren't in a position to do that. So they're hiring people that are high C or high S that have a little bit of I. So they don't mind talking to customers, but they're not really, that's not their passion. They're not, they're not getting their jollies from that.
Inherently good at it. Forgive me.
I have a question about best practice. It related to what you just said, and I've been thinking about it as you're going through some life cycle stages here. Some of those really awesome success organizations, and I use the word success because they're oriented around business outcomes, not around like being responsive to something broken, right?
Right.
The service engineer or whoever's working the issue, right? Not always an engineer. Sometimes works side by side with someone with a slightly different profile, right?
Yes.
And I'm sort of wondering, like, clearly we're not going to give every single ticket is not going to get paired up with an engineer and an account manager when it's like a password reset, right? But in the MSP industry, are you seeing that success formula becoming best practice? Is that something that you guys see?
It depends on your vertical. That's actually a really good question. And we've seen that happen in another industry already. So if you look at the automotive service industry, which is very similar to ours in terms of most of the revenue comes from support and service, not from the initial sale. If you get into like fleet maintenance, you'll notice in fleet maintenance, a lot of the pleasantries and niceties are removed. You know, you think of like a classic Jiffy Lube, you literally drive your truck in over a pit. They change your oil while you sit there and you drive away. You don't talk to anybody at all. They don't ask you questions. They don't explain what they're doing. Yeah, they just get it. They get it done. So to that vertical, that's a value add because I don't own that truck. It's a fleet truck. I don't care. I just need the oil change and I got to get to my job site. Mm-hmm. But now, like, imagine like I send like my wife to go get that same service with her Hyundai. That may or may not be reflected as a positive experience to her. She might like the fact she doesn't have to talk. In fact, she didn't have to talk to anybody. But afterwards, she would be like, I don't know what they did. I don't know if I paid the right amount. Was this correct? They did this other stuff. I just said yes. I didn't know. So you have to, and this isn't really like a ticket thing, but you have to figure out as an MSP, and there's a lot of small MSPs struggle with this because they're not verticalized. What does your client base want? And then you can kind of align your model. Because if your client base is mostly professional organizations, one of our big verticals in my former MSP was veterinary clinics. Well, they know how their vet tech is supposed to work. So they don't need a lot of like hand-holding back rubs. They just want results because they have a patient on the table. But a lot of the other small businesses we used to support that weren't that, they did want exactly what Matthew is saying. And there's the power of having a human dispatcher. So at our MSP, we had human dispatchers that would kind of almost be mini PMs for every ticket. They would oversee the ticket. They would let the client know, here's who's going to be working on it. Here's when they're going to be working on it. Here's what they're going to be doing. Here's what they need from you. We don't need you at all.
It's probably related to the triaging process.
A lot of that's related to the triage. But then there's the alternative model where you see solutions like TimeZest, where you can automate that person out of the equation and arrive at the same result. And so it depends a lot on your vertical and what they want. You know, if your vertical doesn't need a person who's able to give that extra level of human business intelligence and kind of be like the ticket sommelier that guides you through the tasting experience, then you can probably do that with automation. What you should not do is not do it at all. And a lot of organizations that struggle, that are smaller and they have a lot of different verticals that they're trying to support, they end up in a position where the weight of trying to do that is just so much that they just sort of are like, nah, people will read the ticket updates. And I mean, we all know, all of us, you know, being vendors, we know that no end user in the history of end users can read. So no, they do not read the tickets, and they do exactly what we talked about earlier. They make up their own story in their head, and you know. So
Well, we're starting to approach.
Oh,
We've
no.
got 5 minutes left here. How many life cycle stages of a ticket do we have left? And maybe let's hit them at a highlight before.
Yeah, I'll hit them at a high level. So we talked about the time entry. So the next thing is really having some sort of QC and accountability loop for that time entry. So if you're rendering service, you need a way to make sure, preferably in close to real time, that you're rendering the right service accurately and appropriately. This is a for-profit business. I need to bill for that product. So we don't want like a meal delivered to the table that somebody eats and then says it wasn't what I wanted. We want to know right away, hey, this isn't what I ordered. Go make it right before that happens. So you have your QC loop. And then from there, you really get to billing. And billing is going to be whether you are literally billing or simply accruing that against an agreement. That's really your last chance to make sure that everything else that happened before was accurate, proper, and treated right. Because from an SLA standpoint, you're done there. And in the mind of most clients, you're done there. And we know that because how aggravating is it after billing on anything when either you have to reach out and ask a follow-up or the vendor has to reach out, not even MSP stuff. Like if you pay someone to power wash your house and then a week later you find a spot they missed, they're always not happy you're calling them back. Even if they're like, oh my God, hi. In their minds, like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, so billing really is your last chance to make sure that doesn't happen. And to have that final chance, if there was a mistake, to account for it. That's pretty much it. And at that point, the idea is everything you've done should result in an invoice that everybody involved would stand behind and give a thumbs up to, and take a Michael Scott picture of that we agree with the invoice.
Who's your favorite Office character?
Dwight.
What
Dwight
about
for
you,
sure.
David?
That's a good question. I was going to say Dwight, but then since
Robert
Dwight.
California. I'm sorry. I'm changing to Robert California from
All right. I can
the
see
last season.
Maybe
Matt?
Jim. I don't know if I had more hair.
Matt, you strike me as an Angela kind of guy.
I can't even choose.
Let's pull those slides up and let's hear how.
Oh yeah, who's helped? What do you guys?
Oh my gosh!
You guys are really good at
stuff.
not pitching during the whole deal. You guys are like,
so do you have a dishwasher? Do you need it fixed? I'm just kidding.
So the best part is that the whole bit about the triage and kind of that early on like response time, communication, things like that was all pitch. Helpt was built out of the need for that type of interaction, with customers and clients. And so, we left that organization that was, selling transceivers or selling widgets. They were being supported, and then, relationships were being built. And we said, you know what? Let's see what we can do to be unique in this space, to know what good looks like and deliver it on behalf of our clients. And so that's how Helpt came to be. On the next slide, I think it talks a little bit about how Helpt might be a little bit different. Here's how it's a little bit different. We're all 100% US-based technical support. One of the big deals is just making sure that we're, matching with the people that are calling it, cultural, language, all of that. The next thing is that, we do believe in humans. We won't set up an IVR on behalf of our clients. If a client wants their IVR to point to us, we'll pick up the phone. It's always going to be a human that's picking up the phone right away. We're available 24/7, 365. It's the most infuriating thing when something goes down at 5 o'clock, 5:01, and you get that call and you say, crap, I got to take this one. We can be the ones that are there to kind of take it, understand how bad of an issue it is, triage it, send it over to you, have you take care of it. And then the one on the left there, flexible plans. We're all about what it is that our clients need. Find out the business need. If you don't offer 24/7 to your customers, probably not going to need 24/7 from us. But if you have shoulder hours, if you take you guys out to a picnic and you need some overflow, some help, we can do that. The next one, oh my gosh. All right. So the next one goes into this new exciting thing that we've been doing lately. It's Helpt Now. And so Dean got a little spicy when it came to triage and like how important it is and how focused we need to be on that, because that's that first interaction that you're ever going to have with your customer who's having this issue. What we've done is we've launched Helpt Now as a 24/7 available US-based technical live answering system. The idea is that, if your customer's calling because they're freaking out about something, they're not going to ring or sit on hold for minutes at a time. They're not going to get the voicemail. They're going to get somebody on our team acting on behalf of you to answer the phone, to start to understand what it is that's going on with the issue, set some expectations, and then hand it off to you as the client or to our clients to be able to take care of it. Dean, I feel like I'm missing some things. Jump in.
I'll just tell you the ICP. So, like you talked about earlier with the Australian cybersecurity framework, there were levels of maturity. In the same way, MSPs have these growth levels of maturity where there are certain operational needs you need to fill to get to the next level, but there's only so much revenue dollars. So we find that while we work with everybody, the people who are best able to use us are probably somewhere in that space where they probably have a one-ish dispatchers already answering the phone, but they can't really afford to add more than that. But they need to start to get their more mature clients they're going after. They do need to have more people available to them, so it's not going to voicemail. So those types of MSPs that are struggling with how do I move to that next maturity jump, those are the best Helpt clients.
All right. Well, Matt, any takeaways?
I don't know. I just feel like I want to open a
open a bunch of service tickets.
A live professional services business. I feel like you guys just charge me up. I gotta say.
Oh, good.
You guys are very easy to talk to. This was a blast.
Partnership incoming.
Absolutely. My takeaway, and for me, it's the big focus on triaging that we took. I like to spend my life where you take a little bit of a slower approach to the beginning of something, and that allows you to blast through it because you took the time to analyze the problem, and then solve the problem really efficiently.
Measure twice, cut once, right?
Yeah, exactly. I made a Survivor reference earlier. I don't know if it was on the pre part of this or in the beginning of this call, but the groups that sit there, talk about the problem together, and then solve the puzzle are the groups that usually win, even though it starts out as they look behind. And you guys describing, let's triage these problems properly, get them in the right place so the whole thing goes smoother. I think that's a really, really great highlight. And I think it's applicable to not just service tickets, but life in general. I've enjoyed having you guys on. I can't wait for the next time that we talk. And I can't wait for next Friday, where we're going to be having Cork. I actually remember off the top.
Nice.
Cork on, where we're going to be having a conversation about cyber warranties, and how cyber warranties can be a good supplemental gap coverage for the cyberspace. And then I was told by our marketing lead that I was supposed to remind viewers and listeners about our Cyber Peer meetup, which is on Fridays at 11. And to check out our portal if you haven't done that before, and there's lots of valuable stuff in there as well. And I'm going to get better at messaging that as time goes. But for now, thank you guys for joining us, and thank everybody else for joining as well. And have a great weekend.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.